Okay, this is a quick tutorial video on how to use the skeleton rig. There's a bunch of little features in this rig that are there to help make animating certain things much more convenient and fast. And as we start getting into animation blockouts, I want to make sure that everybody is utilizing those features as much as you can, because I don't want people just like wasting their time doing something in a tedious way than when there's a much more efficient and better looking way to do it, right? So first off, these controls are the IK FK switches, right? So now the arms and legs are all on IK, now they're all on FK, right? You can choose one by one what you want, right? So that's what those are. Pretty standard. You have, regular IK foot controls. You have these little green ones are all for reverse foot things, right? These toe controls are a little unique. They're not hard to figure out, so I won't spend much time on them. But basically, they're IK toes. So as you move these, the toe segment before it is going to start pointing at that thing, right? So there's that. One thing that, okay, so I'll start with the spine. So if you'll notice on here, there's a follow translate and a follow rotate attribute, right? This spine follows this hip control, right? So right now it's following translate, but it's not following rotate. What that means is, as I move around the hip control, the spine is going to follow as, to be in the right spot that it's supposed to be in, but it's not going to follow the rotation to have the same rotation, right? If you want to change that, then you can turn this on, and now whenever you move the hip, everything else above it follows, right? And you have that all up the spine. So right now, if I move this control, everything above it follows like that. If you want to, you can turn off the rotate, right? It'll follow like that. This is especially helpful on, one, the first spine, and two, on the head, depending on what you want to do, right? So right now the follow rotate is turned off on that. You can kind of look around like that, right? So that's generally, I usually like to have it follow rotate turned off on the head control. Now another thing that there is all over this rig is this operating space attribute. So as you can see on the foot, this one is currently turned to cog control, which means that that foot control is following the cog, right? Whatever the cog does, the foot control is going with it. If you want to, you can change this to a whole bunch of other stuff, including transform control. So now as we move the transform control, the foot moves around. But if we move the cog, that foot control doesn't move around, right? That can be really helpful for animating walk cycles, or just animating him going from one place to another in general, right? One place that this kind of thing can be really helpful is, let's go to the arms. Suppose you want to, right, and obviously you would pose things to look better here, but suppose you want to take off the head, right? We can take both of these hand controls for the IK arms, and we can switch them to head, right? So now they're following the head, and you can make it look like he's taking off his head, right? Just by moving around this head control. And you don't have to actually animate the hands doing anything once you get them up there, right? All you have to do is turn on that switch and do that, right? So that kind of thing happens. You might do that kind of thing depending on what you're having to animate. You're going to want to use the space switching because it's going to make it much more convenient. You don't have to position things for every movement and all that. If you'll look at here on the operating space, you'll notice all of these ones. Left space control 1, left space control 2, left blah blah blah, right? There's a whole bunch of those, and it's like, okay, well, where are those? So there's this control, this circular one above his head. This controls the visibility of all those controls, right? So these controls are exclusively for space switching. They have no other purpose, right? If you ever want to see some of them, you can turn them on or off. I usually like to have them off unless I'm using them. Then I just turn on the one that I'm using, right? So for now, let's turn these on. One thing that you might want to do is there's a scene in a short film where he takes off his arm and he starts spinning around like an nunchuck, right? So one thing that you might do is you'll have this in FK. And if you wanted this hand to take off this arm, right, you'll notice this arm has an operating space attribute, but it doesn't have anything in here for the left hand control, right? So how do you take off the arm? Well, the reason it doesn't have an attribute for taking off, or for the right hand, is because then you get into some circular logic there, and then the rig breaks. So the solution is we say, hey, you know what? What's the name of this space control? Left space control 1. So let's switch this to left space control 1. Right, so now as I move this around, it moves the arm. That doesn't help us too much yet, right? But now what we can do is we can take this hand and we can bring it over here, and you can say, hey, I want this hand to be also following left space control 1, right? Then you can take this control and you can move it around, and now it looks like this hand is, you know, carrying this thing. And obviously you might want to position things a little better. But you can imagine if you were to position things better, it would look like this hand is moving around this arm, right? And then you can animate the arm swinging around, doing whatever, right? So that's the main time that you're going to be using these orange space controls, right? Another thing that's kind of hidden, but not really, are on here, there's the IK-FK switch, right? You know what that does. But on top of that, there's actually regular arm and reverse FK arm. So right now, here's the reverse FK arm. Or here's the regular arm, right? It works like a regular FK. From the shoulder down, you can move it around like that. But if you ever wanted to grab the arm by the wrist and swing everything else around, then you could turn off the regular arm, and you could turn on this reverse FK arm. And this one, as you'll notice, goes from the wrist out, right? Ignore the flipping there. That's just a little bit of weirdness. So this could be helpful for, you know, if you ever want to grab it by the wrist and swing it around the other way, then you can do that. Anyways, the last bit I want to get to is the face rig. So on the face, we have all these circle controls, right? And these circle controls are what actually move the face around. But in addition to that, you have these three big face controls, right? And what these ones do is they don't directly control anything on the face, but they do drive some of these controls to do some preset things. So for instance, you can go up and down, right? Or you can rotate them. It does angry or like sad type of thing, right? This one, you can rotate, get happy or sad. You can make it wider. You know, you can make it smaller. You can move it around and do that kind of stuff. So as you're animating the face, the bulk of your animation should be done with these because it's a lot faster. And you know, any smaller things, smaller changes, you can take these and you can adjust them, kind of do what you need, and you know, fix things there. But the bulk of your animation should be done using these bigger controls, right? So, sorry, I realize there's one last thing to get into, and it's these little green bone controls. These are so you can just like take this off, right? So if he ever grabs out a piece of his spine, you could do that if you want to. And as well as this control is for the head, and this control is also for that. The difference between these two is this one pivots on the neck, right? This one is right in the middle of the head. It's in the head's center of gravity. So if the head goes on the ground and starts rolling around, that rolling using this control is going to be a lot easier to get it to look good than the rolling using this control, right? So yeah.